Please welcome co-founder and president of LNS Research, Matthew Littlefield.
Welcome back. It is an absolute privilege and honor to introduce our final keynote panel of the 2023 Industrial Transformation event. The topic of this panel is going to be on Operation 2030 and the journey to Zero Plus. And it's a powerful message, and I hope it's resonated over the course of this week. There have been countless moments of inspiration and insight, but one that particularly resonated with me was from Ellis's keynote yesterday. And the idea that leaders today, if you're not focused on tomorrow's problems, you're already losing. And this is a group of panelists that I've known for a long time, and they are laser focused on tomorrow's problems and tomorrow's panel. All right, so please welcome to the stage Allison Kuhn. Thank you.
All right, since we have such an amazing group of thought leaders that are coming up here today, I will not take much time at all, even though all of you here and live stream think, yeah, right? Operation 2030, that is the IX event theme this year, the journey to zero. Zero harm, zero waste, zero net carbon. And while we are doing that, we're also looking for step change, productivity gains. So when we talk about sustainability in ESG, we look at improving that performance, and right now it is the top manufacturing trend that is affecting businesses today. There's a variety of reasons, right? There's your stakeholder pressures. There's because your Gen Z audience requires and demands. There's also because it's the right thing to do for our children, for our grandchildren. There's also the right thing to do because of the load that manufacturing takes from the planet. Currently, we take over 50% of the energy availability for the planet. And considering our footprint, that's pretty significant. But oftentimes, what drives us is our profit, and we need to make profit. So is there money in sustainability? Yes. There's been numerous studies that have happened over and over and through the years. And through our latest research, through not just future of industrial work research, but our latest DPX research, which again, operational excellence, digitized to make a more holistic digital environment where we can actually look and see that not only is sustainability an imperative today, but it's something that you get to do. It's not something that you have to do. And I want you to look at these numbers, and I see many of you in the audience taking pictures, so that brings a big smile to my face. 86% of those that look at sustainability as an imperative, which means sustainability is the top driver of their IX programs. 80% of them have been growing their revenues by at least 3%. If we look at operating margins, again, you'll see the same diagram to the right of those increased revenues. You'll see that, yes, I'm saying that at least 3%, but if you look at that 11 to 20% and more than 20%, there's some significant differences there. Reducing cost of goods sold. Earlier, I talked about how the cost of goods sold is a serious issue across manufacturing and what we're working on. 82% of those are reducing COGS by at least 3%, but a vast majority are above 6%, and the big differentials are 11% and above. So it is not a secret that sustainability and ESG is almost like politics and religion. There's one of those few things that you really just can't talk about because there's so many polarized views. It has been politicized. It turned from something scientific to something dirty and ugly to some people. And what we need to recognize is that as executives, as leaders, that we need to drive from the top and understand the true why, but we also need from the bottom, right? Them letting them tell us why they've changed their patterns, why our consumer trends have changed, and we need to set these big, hairy, audacious goals. And the alphabet super requirements, that's just another thing for operations, because the type of operations we have has always got her done, right? Where there's a will, there's a way, we're going to get her done. And there is a will and a way to get her done in the way that makes it easier, makes it better, makes it safer. So I'd like to look at inviting this panel up here and discuss how together we're going to be redefining ESG. So I want to thank our marketing department and the graphic here of putting this vision that I had alive to show the interconnectedness of ESG. It's a puzzle piece, and in the middle, that's money. That's nirvana. For digital X, digital Y, digital Z, digital et cetera, right? What Bitcoin, what have you, that is true money. I just showed you the slide. So how do we look at environmental, lower costs, increase revenue, our social, increase employee attraction and retention, and last, our governance, improve brand recognition, and teach us all to look through our different lens and move forward to accelerate the journey to Operations 2030. So I'd love to have my panel here that I'm so humbled to join, these thought leaders. Thank you, Alex. Come on. All right. Do you feel like you're in the hot seat?
No.
I didn't think so. These guys are phenomenal. So we have some questions here for you today, and I'm going to randomly pick from a queue. You may or may not have seen a few that you're going to get. And we're also going to go to the audience, and hopefully this LinkedIn Live audience is also using the comment section to be able to give us some feedback. So Ellis, you just happen to sit here next to me. That wasn't the plan all the way. So I'm going to go ahead and read this here, not verbatim per se, but sustainability and ESG has become very politicized, right? We just talked about that numerous times. What have you been able to do, or what can you recommend to help kind of cut out the noise out there so that the organization can truly focus on what's important?
Yeah, well, for me, when I was CSO and as a board member, but when I started this journey as a CSO and my team started this journey and helping the company mature, you can't. We didn't fall into the trap, and people tried to pull you into the trap of having this political debate. Is climate change real? People just got, well, I'd sit down with people in the organization. It says, climate change real, and does that really add value to the business? And for me and my team, what we tried to do was, and I think we were very successful at it, we said, look, and I talked about that yesterday, you have to connect and integrate sustainability. People say, well, Ellis, what's the sustainability strategy? And worse, they would say, what's your sustainability strategy? I said, I don't have a sustainability strategy. Now, what we're going to do is have a business strategy or a sustainable business strategy. So the key for me for eliminating all of that noise was connecting sustainability and integrating sustainability into our business and having a sustainable business strategy. And that was the approach. I did not have a separate sustainability strategy. And so in essence, I loved it. The day that it really sank in, and I think the team got it, we were sitting around with the leadership team, and the CFO walks in the room. And he said, Ellis, what are we doing? What are we meeting here for? And he says, why are we here? And I said, look, we need to have this discussion because I really need, we're building some momentum, but I think some people in the organization are still struggling. And he looked at me and said, Ellis, this is the work. This is the work that we do. This is nothing extra. It's no longer something separate for the organization. This is the work that we do. And so as you go forward, you have to connect and integrate. You have to make it the work that you do as an organization. And it has to be you do a materiality assessment to say, here's where your stakeholders are saying you need to work because there's risk to your business long term, and that means there's risk to our business. So for me, it's connecting, it's integrating, it's a sustainable business strategy. It's not a sustainability strategy. It's not the CSO strategy. It is the company strategy. And when you're able to do that, it's not easy. You can't do it overnight. I'm not saying it's easy. But that's what you have to work towards as a business, connecting it, making it a sustainable business strategy, and then it becomes what you do. And you don't stop doing your business because someone says, hey, climate change isn't real. No, it's now in your business, and this is what you do as a business.
Wow. It's not often we see such excitement and engagement towards the end of an event, but I've continued to see it, and that is such a big issue, right?
Yes, it is.
How do we help folks demystify, make it less complicated, less complex? So that is excellent.
Can I add something?
Please, because you're coming next. by
The,
way.
for Rockwell Automation, sustainability has been part of our business for a long time. But we did, 5 years ago, materiality assessment. We actually wanted to look at all of our stakeholders, customers first, investors, employees, the community, and understand what do we need to do differently. Okay, it's always been part of our business, and we basically that showed that it's got to be more a higher level imperative. It's got to be integrated, and we did have to reorganize and elevate the function. And actually, you see the 3 outcomes that we show on the slide. That's actually, we have created a new organization, okay, that was more intentional around sustainability. And it was looking at our stakeholders, customers, investors, employees, partners. What do they think we should do? What do they think how should we be successful? What could we do? What should we do? And that was what drove it. So it took the politics out of the equation. And one other comment. We actually, what we do too, we did notice the politics, so we use sustainability instead of ESG. It takes a lot of noise out of the equation too.
Yeah, they're 2 very different topics. And having worked with Rockwell and or others, right, our members and users and vendors, I actually gave you some feedback when I looked, and I've seen some incredible growth. While we still see some immaturity across the market, we still see some incredible growth, and they're out there to leverage. So Tom, you're actually the second question I was hoping that you would answer. I don't go in that type of order, right? If you don't know,
I'm pretty disruptive, so she's saving me for last.
I know how to tame Mike, so I'm going to make sure that Mike gets a good question when it comes. Mike, be ready. So Tom, the journey to zero, right? It is different for every single industry group, right? And even within the industry, it can still be very company dependent and honestly leadership dependent and culture dependent. How does the ever-changing scope of the sustainability expectations that we're dealing with, the pressures that are impacting, our business and what we prioritize and when, how do you deliver measurable success? And what happens when you don't?
So I think it does tie back. I talked about our process. I think other companies also have to have a similar process of longer term, okay? Whether that's 2030 or 2040 or 2050. We'd like it to be 2030. With all of your stakeholders, understanding what's the strategy, how is it embedded in the strategy, and then what are the goals that come out of that. Obviously, you do have to be adjustable to the regulations changing and morphing and that kind of, that's got to be built into the equation. And then you actually have to develop a strategic roadmap and strategy, annual, year by year, of how you'll get there. I mean, just take scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, some tangible areas of focus, having a year by year, categorizing the programs, the investment, the cost, the carbon reduction, et cetera. You got to have detailed programs of achieving these very aspirational goals. So that's I'd say that's a best practice that we've learned from other companies, and that's what we're following too.
Can I add to that?
Absolutely.
And we had the same process. And the other thing that we would try to do, and people would wonder, say, when you tell your story, I would sit down with shareholders, and always, look, you have to be transparent. Our sustainability is being very transparent with your journey and with your path. You have to lay out your goals. But one of the things I tried to do was really lay out how we're going to get there. And not just from like the projects, but how we're structuring, you mentioned the organization, how we're structuring the organization, how we're integrating sustainability into all of our functions, how we're integrating sustainability into all of our business processes. Hey, we now put sustainability in a capital planning process. Hey, next year, and I would just be very transparent. Hey, here's our maturity, here's where we are, here's where we're going. Hey, next year, sustainability will be integrated into our new product development process. And man, when people saw that and they heard that, they started saying, okay, you're being transparent, you still have some steps to go and some processes, some maturity to go, but you're telling us how you're going to get there and when you're going to get there. And then the next meeting with BlackRock next year, I'd say, okay, it's in the new product planning, new product development process. And here's what came out of that new product development process. And it just gave more credibility to what we've said externally in terms of our goals. And then the roadmap that we've let out to say, okay, here are the interim goals, here's how we're going to get there. But it just gave us more credibility with the stakeholders. They said, okay, we believe you guys are really working towards this 2030, 2035, 2040, 2050 ambition.
Wow. Michael,
Yes.
would you like to add on to that since you tame me so much better?
When I listened to all this stuff, the word that really stuck with me was the work. And the reason it sticks with me is because what gets done doesn't change. Sustainability may, in places, change how we get that done, right? Where appropriate. Certainly what we've learned here through this today, this yesterday and today, is that there is a great need for people to participate differently in how we get that stuff done over what's been going on. Today, we heard David talk about this future where wouldn't it be nice if we had this automaticity of machines doing things for us, right? And to a much greater degree than maybe they are. Well, the reality of it is that future is already here. So if you think that you have to wait for 2030 for machines to make decisions for you that tell you that, and make decisions throughout your entire supply chain to intermediate the difference between what should be going on in your enterprise, all optimized relative to what's actually going on in your assets, right? And tell you where to put your capabilities to close that gap. That world already exists. We're already doing it. Now, can you do that in enterprise scale? You better figure out how to build the infrastructure and architecture to scale that.
Yeah.
And so the technologies to do this and the methodologies already exist. And it's going to change everybody's world because the ability to make decisions in a transactional world of function and process already is real. And if you're not doing it, it may be too late. And so people are going to change how they participate in how we get things done. So all the collective knowledge in your company will be combined to make decisions for the future, right? For the outcome you're trying to achieve. And this is This is difficult for us to get our heads wrapped around because we're so used to having built an organization that achieves this function for us. But you no longer have to do that. Now you apply the power of compute to do this orchestration for you relative to the data and knowledge that exists inside your company, relative to what's going on live at the asset, right? And you close that gap in real time with transparency to what's going on at the asset.
Yeah.
That's way different than what any of us have been used to living. And we'll have to figure out how to manage differently in that world. It also means that kind of transparency to the asset is exactly what Ellis is talking about. Things get made where they're needed now, because transparency to capacity means that that capacity is available for manufacture where it's the most sustainable.
So Mike, you know, the LNS research framework, you know, we really start with people, process, and then technology. So I've heard each one of them say how important, right, that culture, the people aspect, how we do the work, not what we do, but we know that, again, while we're struggling, we're not making as much progress. We hear so much about the net zero carbon goals. It's just so out there, right? We're so focused. If we look, and there's studies out there that show the amount of requirements on boards and the CEOs, they are not on the carbon emissions factors. When ESG, folks want to focus so much on carbon, you cannot. Over 60% are human capital management mandated. That's what is the big thing right now. The burning platform is human capital management. So the human part and the process part. But that doesn't mean technology is not big. So are you ready? To answer my next one, I'm gonna give you a somewhat easy one because I believe you can handle it.
Who are you giving it to?
You.
Oh boy.
You ready?
You may have to help me.
Oh no, it's coming to you.
I'm there for you.
All right, and again, not verbatim. We've got a lot of innovative solutions. We've got some incredible things that have been developed over the years, and they can do some incredible things. We're eliminating what has traditionally been extremely tedious and boring data collection. We've looked at our tedious analysis. I love Microsoft. I love Excel, just for the record, but we've got too much of it out there, and we're looking at, you know, how can we actually change what we're doing? We're still doing the same thing. So when it comes to reporting and creating actionable insights, how are we moving the needle with our technology? How can you?
Wow, you wouldn't ask me that. I get a lot of calls from people, and they say, I can give you actionable intelligence or I can give you intelligent insights. And my comment back is, you think that's my problem? You think my problem is I don't know what my problems are. And the truth in manufacturing is that we know what our problems are. We have so many of them. The issue is prioritization, right? So if somebody gives me just another thing to go do among the thousands of things I have to prioritize, it probably is not going to help. If they happen to give me one I don't know, right? And then in amongst all that stuff, right, it's an application that has to fit into something that I already have, right, that I'm not already geared for because I don't have the infrastructure and architecture to plug an application in, and that makes it scalable because I haven't prepared for that. And at the same time, I don't have a delivery device, right, or a delivery application for people that have been there 2 years, that turn over every 2.5 years, right, to know what to do with an insight that you deliver to them in the same context you used to deliver to people that's been there 35 years, right? So the issue is the ops model. The ops model that we use and the level of engagement that we need from people in that ops model has to change. So when we say the way people participate and the way we get things done has to change. And it's going to be difficult, and it's going to take a different level of automation. It's going to take a different level of, I'll say it this way, a different level of intelligence, data AI, knowledge AI, a synthesis of this stuff to help deliver insights at the right place, at the right time, to make these kinds of things successful in the future, because the world's changed, we need to adapt to it, not the other way around. And if we're hoping for that environment to become true the way it used to be, as Matthew says, sooner or later, your assets are going to have somebody else's name on them, because you will have waited too long. And so I think the human aspect is probably the greatest challenge that's came out of it.
Yeah, but the technology that is continuing to be developed, and not just because Rockwell's up here and sponsored it, right? We've got many other folks that are here in this room and that are tuned in that are making some absolutely, completely step change differences. Things that in my young, old life that, you know, just didn't see possible 20 years ago, much less 5 years ago, I didn't see possible some of these things that have come about. So it is a threefold trifecta, right, of the technology. But if you don't have that people and process, it's really not going to work. But let's take it back a little bit.
I'd like to add one comment, if you don't mind.
Please.
I do think, like you talked about obviously as a technology company, we care about the technology, and we think it's many times.
I care about your technology.
Thank you. People and processes. But I do think for manufacturing, there is some concepts that sustainability comes at a cost to productivity. And I think that paradigm has changed. And that's a lot of that's around technology, but also follows with people and processes. But there still is across, you know, I deal with manufacturers all over the world and talking to them. And at the senior levels, the general concept is sustainability is going to hurt my productivity. And that we need to dispel that myth that no longer exists. You know, with the data, with what you talked about, the insights from real data, we can drive both together. So.
Absolutely. I ask, I challenge, I beg each of you who took a picture of that chart that showed the impact to revenue, cost of goods. If you took a screenshot from home, please post that on LinkedIn. Whether you tag LNS Research or not, post it. We want it out there. We want more sustainable, more reliable operations. That is our passion. And the next question I'd like to give would go back to Ellis. I want to get back to a little bit of this politicized stuff and these big, hairy, audacious goals, right? You know, I'm a big believer of those. I'm big in stretch, right? But we're seeing a lot of sweat right now with 2030 coming, 2050 coming. And, you know, this disruption is huge. The technology disruption has driven us. But now we've got folks like the UK Prime Minister who's stepping up to the podium and is having to say, look, we promised this on this date and on this time, and I'm telling you right now, I can't do it. So that was a huge moment as to somebody stepping out there and saying, I actually cannot hit this net zero goal that I promised. Are our goals too aggressive, Ellis? Or?
I don't think they're too aggressive. I always say the hard things are hard because they're hard. I mean, this is hard stuff. This isn't easy. You know, whether it's zero emissions, whether it's zero fatalities, zero injuries, zero waste.
It's hard.
It's hard. This is hard stuff. I don't see a problem with, again, I go back to transparency. And the UK Prime Minister, he was being transparent, saying, man, I don't know if we can get there. I don't think people are going to stop. I think the data, I shared some of the data. I think the research from LNS talks about some of this, but I shared some of the data as well, that a lot of companies are confident that they have this strategy. A lot of companies are confident that they're making the right investments, but there are some gaps that they have to work through. And I think, look, if you throw out there, hey, I'm having some challenges, that's okay. Because I'm a big believer in transparency, because transparency also opens you up to get help. I used to have this debate with my legal team all the time. And Ellis, we can't say that. No, you can't say that. We can't put that in the report. Well, how the heck are we going to get help if we can't say it? If we don't, I had a great boss say, you can't manage a secret.
Oh, man.
You can't manage the secret, so say it. And now let's get some help.
Well, so let's use an example, right, of that. How many people want some of that called generative AI? How many people want some of that? Right? Everybody raise their hand. So the entire world.
Seriously, raise your hand.
Yeah, the entire world wants some of that called generative AI. And so we're all asking for it, right? The issue is that most senior leaders in organizations don't know what artificial intelligence does for their business. Therefore, when they see a tool like generative AI, they don't know how to apply it in any perspective to what it would do in that framework, right? So let me help you with generative AI. Generative AI is just a tool, right? Matter of fact, it's not really artificial intelligence, but it's just a tool, right? It is, to put a point on it, it is the way you communicate as a person with technology. It is also the way technology will communicate with you. What it will do is, being good at generative AI is the beginning of the end of your journey, right? You have to go do it. So if you think you can get out of it, you can't, right? Unless you want your assets to have somebody else's name on it, right? And so in perspective, right, you have to be good at generative AI. But it is not what's going to save you. It's going to help you and enable you. But having it in that perspective, as an executive team, helps you not think that it answers all your problems. It does not make decisions. It's data science. It cannot make decisions, right? It's not causal, so it can't do some of the things people say it can do.
Clap. And actually, you made me so inspired that I'm sorry, I'm throwing a wild card in here.
This is payback for the water.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't get your water switched, by the way.
Have we always been transparent in manufacturing? When I think about this trust situation we've got with our workforce?
No. Transparency, or in my opinion, the manufacturer's been in the shadows for a very long time.
Yeah.
In what you would say is, the enterprise itself has this expectation, and Alice, you're going to bail me out here, right? The enterprise has this expectation of what they think should be going on. The asset runs, and then they come back and say, hey, this is what we did, and it's all in hindsight.
You've run your assets off.
Yeah.
Ellis, you got to weigh in on this, right? Because have we been more transparent? Are we really being even transparent to ourselves, much less our workforce, much less the general public? And what do we need to do here? Because we've got to make manufacturing sexy again, or all of us are in trouble.
Look, I think, as leaders, if you're managing a site, I think every leader, you have to go in and say, I have to win the shop floor.
Yeah.
How do I win the shop floor? And that was, again, I was fortunate to have some great mentors in my career. And when I went to run a manufacturing facility, my mentor said, you can spend all the time you want to spend at the union hall with the union leadership, but you're going to lose. Not that they're bad people. He said, you need to win the shop floor. And you need to be on that shop floor, and you need to figure out what that operator needs to win every day. And you have to win the trust of that shop floor. And part of that is that transparency. Again, it's not easy, man. I tell you what, you have to be vulnerable as a leader to go out there and win the shop floor, because they'll call you. They'll call you on it.
And we need them to. I told somebody at a round table before, I want to find the one who's going to scream at me. Because the one who's going to scream at me and what I've been doing wrong is telling me 90% of those who aren't telling me what I need to hear. So being vulnerable and hearing that open, we can't fix it if we don't know it.
Being human.
Be human. I've had to learn that the tough way in being vulnerable and admitting things. So I'm going to switch back now. I'll go back to a card question if it helps you guys. But are they not doing excellent? These are excellent thought leaders here. Excellent thought leaders. So Tom, I'm going to bring you right back on in this. So LNS Research has some research around operationalizing sustainability, right? And a lot of that is about embedding sustainability and not just bolting it on, right? But making it a part of your DNA, making it a part of your culture. Again, like we're doing this for the shop floor, not to the shop floor. We get to do this. We don't have to do this. So when we look at embedding sustainability into our decision making, how do we make this imperative and help pivot and get the value that we just showed the data? There's been value around, and it's been proven since the 1980s that being more sustainable uses less energy, uses less water, you have less lawsuits due to your impact to the environment. So tell me a little bit about how do we move this COP-based, compliance-based, I have to report-driven culture to one in which we understand why we're doing it. And in the words of Pete Busby, who is not here today, an LNS research analyst is one of my mentors, how do we go from that scorekeeper to moving from that goalie aspect to more of the goaltender?
So I'll talk a little bit from a technology perspective, but I do think that with the customers that we deal with, with the operations people, they do have to think about you can drive sustainability and productivity together. And from a technology perspective, we've had that in mind, and our architecture and our systems, we have integrated the production control system and the sustainability system. So using the same data sources, using one system, so you can optimize both together. And so there's a technology element to that, okay?
Yeah.
The other thing is you have to strategically think how sustainability will be an opportunity as opposed to a requirement, let's say. And how do you actually garner more business from it? How do you help them reduce operations? One of the biggest things that we saw was in the studies with the college students that we recruit, we primarily recruit engineers. The number one, actually it was 60%, the number one factor in the study we did 2 years ago about the company they joined, what's the sustainability strategy of that company? So we have to hire the best engineers because everything else fails. So we said, hey, so this really has to be part of our core mission. So I'd say there's the strategy, embedding it piece, but there is a technology element too that's important to have the technology the right way. And actually, Mike talked about that, the system so that you can actually use the data, roll it up, look at it on a global level, have the supporting infrastructure so you can drive the programs and the people and the processes the right way.
Absolutely. Today's day and age with these digital natives, and not just digital natives, you and I, right? We go do our research. We go anywhere possible. I hear and I see that companies are turning sustainability reports that are published into recruiting tools. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, no, it is, again, when you talk about connecting and integrating, it's all the functions. Again, there's a process. I'm a very kind of process-driven person when I think about these things and when I think about maturity. Maturity, and I can tell a low mature company and a very high mature company in sustainability. It doesn't take much to tell where you're at. And it's where sustainability reports, who the CSO is, so the background of that person, who they report to, the organization that they have or they don't have. You can tell where a company is in that kind of maturity phase. It's Is the CSO the hero, the person really driving it, and everybody says, let's just throw it over the fence to the CSO? Do they have a department? Is it functionally integrated? Is it business integrated where we start developing products, sustainable products, and then is our brand known as a sustainable brand? And when you start getting that functional and business integration, HR says, wow, you know what? I need to start recruiting. I need to leverage this in my recruiting. I need to put this in our incentive systems, our comp systems. You know, I need to start evaluating the engineer based on the engineer's mindset on developing sustainable processes, and the person in, you know, good years, material science, and is that person, do they have a sustainability mindset when they're developing new materials? And you start to see that integration, and that's when I think you start to get that value.
So I hope you heard what he said, right? So there's a story. It goes like this: there was a reporter that interviewed Jimi Hendrix, right? And he asked Jimi Hendrix. He said, "Jimmy, what's it feel like to be the greatest living guitar musician?" This was in the late '60s, and Jimmy says, "I don't know. Why don't you go ask Roy Clark?" The point to that is, in order to know what good looks like, you got to have peers that are really good. You just heard a peer that knows what really good looks like. And if you don't hang out with, you're all here, if you don't hang out with those kinds of people, right, then you don't know what good looks like, right? So you're here to understand what you heard him was tell you is how to think about what good looks like. Thank you for that, right? Give him a hand, because he just told you what good looks like, right?
Yeah.
He's Roy Clark.
Yeah. Well,
I've recalled Roy Clark before.
I mean, I'm showing my age by knowing exactly who you're talking about, but I'll, in the words of my mama, here comes some Southernism, right? Birds of a feather flock together. And all of you here, and all of you live on LinkedIn out there, obviously know how important it is, right? And we're looking for stories. We're looking for the exemplars. We're looking for the successes. And this is where it happens. And while I'm going to throw one more zinger out there, I'm going to challenge Mike to answer this within the next 40 seconds when I get it out, because I'm going to ask the audience if you would please ask some questions, because I sure hope that we're getting some questions through LinkedIn Live that we'll get back to. Maybe not right now, but you know, the 3 Ds, Mike. The 3 Ds of manufacturing: dangerous, dirty, dull.
Difficult.
Overcomplicated. My goodness, we have overcomplicated how to slice bread, how to butter our bread. So that's where we got to start strapping things off. And because the more we pile on, the harder it gets, the less time they can focus on what happens. And Mike, what happens when we overly strap folks? What happens to our significant events? What happens to our serious injuries and our reputation? What happens, and where do we do from here?
And so I think what happens is that folks come to our facilities, they turn over and say 2.5 years, some of them less than that. What they're actually doing is they're voting with their feet. And what they're saying is they don't like how they participate in the way we get things done. We should pay attention to that, right? And we need to change how they participate in the way that we get things done.
Yeah, and there's no cookie cutter, right? One finger lost impacts well more than that one person. But since it's not a cookie cutter and it's so industry dependent, and it's culturally dependent across your sites, right? Boy, don't we know, we all want to be flagships. So I'm going to give an opportunity here to ask one of you to ask a very tough question of these thought leaders. As you can see, I threw away the notes. I've added a few extras. So there's nothing these guys can't handle.
I will add to this, to the safety, and it's a great point. I will add to the safety because we talked about trust and transparency. You know, I challenge, and it's, again, winning the shop floor. And one of the things that that we would do, when we had an incident, and it, again, having the employee trust you, where they'll really be honest with you. You go down and say, we would have this process when we do the analysis of the incident. We have the employee there, and we get to a point where we say, okay, so Mike, how's the work get done? How's the work get done? And it was amazing. Of course, you have your standard work, all your procedures, but the number of times we found out that that's not how the work gets done.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
And then you find out, and Mike says, guess what? I'm in the firing line like 5 times a shift.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way I can get the work done.
So we have a question. I'm going to go on a limb here because I'm blinded by some lights by our wonderful magic crew, but I do believe that's Paul back there.
Yeah, it is. I always got a
Oh,
question.
Paul.
I don't know how you cannot have a question for these three. So, great panel, great discussion. I heard transparency. I heard you can't keep it a secret. So, I think each of you should tell us a quick story about something you did that you were certain was right down the plate, and it ended up being an abject failure, a disaster, a setback, whatever you want to call it. Because we got a lot of manufacturing people have a lot of scars. You learn from the scars. Maybe we can learn from your scars. Not saying that you guys are failures, but you get my point.
Only one?
I have a long list. So, look, I running a plant. I mean, you're going to fail. But part of it is just saying, okay, I failed. But I do recall, and again, there are several, but maybe a small one. But we were trying to get more, productive, trying to get more tires out the door, trying to lower our cost. And, finance background, sat down with my team, analyzed the situation, looked at our capacity versus capability, looked at one department, said, man, I have too many shifts in this department. I can eliminate a shift in this department. My team agreed with me. We looked at the data. All the data said I can eliminate a shift in the cutter department. About 6, 8 people, we can eliminate that shift. Union president said, Ellis, I wouldn't do that if I were you. And one of the crews from the other shift said, Ellis, I don't know if you have all the data. I don't know if I would do that. I said, no, the data says I can do it. So I did it. Shut the plant down. Didn't have all the data. I didn't have reality. We were scrambling. I spent more money trying to keep that operation going over time. Bringing in product to keep the plant going. After a few weeks, called the team in and said, that was the dumbest decision I ever made while running this plant. The crew's coming back. Wow. We're doing the shift. We're getting the shift up again. Team said, hey, Ellis, we're glad you admitted you made a mistake. And so, look, you have to admit when you make that mistake. But I've made the mistakes, but I've learned from them.
Thank you for sharing that. Mike?
So, long time ago, we had some outside consultants come in and say, we think you can save a bunch of money. And so we come up with a bunch of initiatives. You guys are all familiar with this. And one of the initiatives was to take out some long fiber out of one of our base sheets. And this was another paper company a long time ago. And so, all of us young engineers said, yeah, we can go do that. The 35-year-old guys went, I don't know if I'd do that or not. So we did it. We done a trial. Guess what? 1 week trial. How'd that turn out? Turned out pretty good, right? So it's worth several $1 million. Let's go do it. Well, over a year's time, that didn't work out so well because the machine was down a whole lot, right? Machine was down a whole lot because you lose strength when you take out long fiber, right? 1 week trial is not a scientific method, right? So what you teach yourself is be careful what you wish for, and do a better job of listening to your frontline employees, right? Because they live it every day. We don't have those frontline employees anymore, and I just wonder.
So I'll just give a reasonably recent example around sustainability. As we were kind of resetting the function, elevating it, looking at the new strategy, we actually, for our sustainability reporting, we didn't take the voices at the right level of all the stakeholders. And one of the noisiest voices are investors. And about 4 years back, we redid our sustainability reporting, very, very investor focused. And we missed the mark with our two most important stakeholders, customers and employees. So we had to basically reset the whole thing and do over. And actually, Allison talked about that. We brought industry analysts to compare against the best, to actually get it. How does this look now? Is this better? And we had some very pointed criticism, or very pointed guidance from some of them and others. And I think we have, in the past 2 years, a much, much more comprehensive report that tells the real story, more transparent, and addresses the other stakeholders, not just investors.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to, that was almost like a requirement state of mind for sustainability, as opposed to strategically thinking about where sustainability can take you.
Perfect. So, because I do see one more person standing up, Mark. Yes, thank you. I'll give you a quick shot at a question, but I do believe that the panel will be around, that we can stay as well, not just for the audience here in the house, but those on LinkedIn Live can reach out, because we know we want to be respectful of time, but I'm sure Mark's got a zinger.
Just a little one. So we mentioned, don't hide a secret, talked about priorities, talked about mistakes. So what about sustainability goals? Many of the companies are struggling. They're not going to reach their sustainability goals for 2025. 2030 is at risk. And so that's the facts, that's the reality. And at the same time, we have this AI revolution, and Mike mentioned, the way the systems are changing. Transactional systems are going to be automated. That's coming at us like the speed of light, and we all have limited priorities. So how would you advise where to prioritize and how to prioritize in the current climate we're in?
May I answer? I think you should keep doing what you're doing right now, Mark. I think you should work with LNS Research and recognize our strengths, to include the different research analyst team that we have here today, that our amazing leaders, Matthew Littlefield and Mehul Shah, has created, because we've got frameworks, we've got lots of information from peers, from success stories. And I only say that because as a 22+ year person in manufacturing, in your shoes, who dang-gum wishes I knew somebody who could have told me this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, to include being vulnerable about my hearing issue. So while I'm not sure I heard exactly every word you said, I'm going to find out, because that was a trust problem. So if we could, I'd love to give these guys a round of an amazing round of applause for their being vulnerable, transparent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was excellent. Good job.
All right, I'll do a quick wrap. Thanks, guys. Thank you for a great panel. One more round of applause for the whole panel. Thank you. Well, that was a lively discussion. I think it was the exact discussion we needed to end to help us move as we go home from strategy to execution. It's really important for all of you to come to events like this, to separate yourself from the day-to-day and think through how do we make real change within our businesses. I have to say, this is our 5th year doing this event, and there has been tremendous change and maturity growth in the industry. 5 years ago, it was all about what is industrial transformation? Why should we be doing this type of work within our businesses? Today I heard, and yesterday I heard, the questions and the themes were all around how do I empower my people to scale faster and move quicker around this change. And I'm so excited to see you back here in a year to share the growth that you've done, right? Going from 5 plants to 100, 10 plants to 1,000. It will happen over that time. So we'll be back in Boston next year, October 28th to the 30th. And I'd like to end with a thank you for our sponsors. As Mehul said, they contributed to this discussion, and it wouldn't be possible without them. So thank you. Travel safe. See you next year. Thank you.
On behalf of everyone at LNS Research, thank you for joining us at this year's The IX event. We hope to see you again next year.